All right, gang, welcome to session 8 of PLN18b. As you can see, I'm sitting in my kitchen and broadcasting this from home. Lisa and I wanted to do something a little bit different this time for the class, for the online session. Obviously, it's asynchronous. Not everyone's going to be on at the same time, but there will be a series of activities that you'll complete, this video being kind of an essential component to that. So what I'm going to do in a minute, I'm using Google Hangouts right now. I'll explain a little bit more about that at the end. But I'm going to share my screen with you all. And we are going to go through the session for the night. So I'm going to do an overview and kind of explain where you're going to be doing certain parts of the class. And then we'll walk you through a couple different ideas, revisit something we've done earlier in session 2 with Wordle and investigating language, and then moving to something a little bit more in depth in terms of contextualizing mentor texts in technology. So this is session 8 online. Again, it's an asynchronous course. The focus is composing text and learning to learn online, modeling the digital writing process. And we're also going to throw in a little bit of investigating language this time. So this is the video greeting and the review. So if you go to the bottom of the session 8 wiki page, you are going to complete this prior to doing anything else. So you're going to add a discussion to the session 8 wiki page with the following. Please pull one piece of textual evidence from chapter 8, modeling and mentoring the digital writing process, that you feel is the core of the chapter and or entire text. Post in the discussion and explain your choice. Comment on 2 classmates' posts. So you are going to add your own discussion. You can put your name, or not really name because you'll be on there, but you can put the title of your post, and then you'll give your piece of textual evidence and why you think it's a core component to that chapter or that text. And that has to be done by Friday, March 19th. And then comments will be due by session 9. So that way, you know, those of you that are looking to comment on other people, you're not waiting until the very last minute. So, and again, you can comment on any two classmates' posts. So that'll be your before. Your during is going to be this video, basically, which will be using word clouds and something called Vocab Grabber to help students write for precision and focus. And so that'll be sort of part of that model we've been following with using mentor text and using digital text as mentor text throughout the course. And then your after will be your journal, and that'll be due at the end of session 8, reflection on the online class session. Please see the syllabus for possible questions to consider reflecting on the readings, or depending on where you are in terms of your classes, if you want to do a tryout lesson. So you can either do a reflection on this particular session, or you can do a tryout. So, but both of those would be due, as close to the end of quote unquote the session as possible. So, obviously before session 9, which is our final class. So those are your options. Then obviously the project is due session 9. So that's the last component. We're going to go over all that during session 7 and how to get that uploaded and take care of that. So we'll handle that for you. All right, so that's the overview. So let's go to tonight's push, and tonight's focus is investigating language through the use of technology. And I subtitled this From Cathedrals to Bazaars. This was a part of a chapter in Heidi Hayes-Jacobs' book, Curriculum 21, back in 2010. Stephen Wilmarth's chapter talks a lot about just how technology is changing everything, changing students, changing our access to information, and moving us away from that old school linear thinking that, everything we got was built layer by layer, as cathedrals were, but moving them more towards a bazaar where there's information all over the place, and kids are learning, and we need to help them learn to adapt by way of just pulling from all different areas and making sense of information that way. So I thought it was an interesting subtext to a presentation like this. So it was session 2. We spent some time with you guys working with Wordle, which is a word cloud generator, and doing different things, having you guys ask questions around author, audience, content, going back to Aristotle's triangle and the work we did around rhetoric. Other questions you could ask around the word clouds were things like, word choice. What does it tell us about the author, the piece itself, and getting kids to really make inferences and dig deep into the words that are used in a particular piece of text and what that can lead us to understand. So one of the next layers to that, and I don't think we went through this with you last time. We had some social studies teachers where I used to work who were taking, when we first learned of Wordle and we were kicking around ideas on how to use it, started to take different speeches or documents throughout U.S. history and turn them into little mini quizzes, kind of quick little type 2 warm-ups, do-nows as kids were coming in. So they would throw up an inaugural speech, from a president when they were covering presidents. And then they would say, all right, we've been learning about all these different presidents. Here's 4 names, who was this? And so they would go through that whole thing with the students and have them, pick apart the language, the words, what's the largest and what really stands out, what's some of the subtext that you see in the background, and then getting at, okay, whose inaugural address was this? Was pretty much the question they asked. And then they got into conversations around what, trying to figure out whose it was, what do all these presidents have in common, where they wartime presidents, were there certain the catastrophes going on throughout their presidency. So really trying to go a little bit deeper into their content knowledge and then using that, and as well as the language that's jumping out off the page in this particular word cloud, and having kids go a little bit deeper in that sense. So this was the first one. Here was the second one. So again, taking the time to ask about context, word choice, intended audience, obviously possible author, and then the third. And this was our modified quiz. There's only 3 choices instead of 4. So if you guys want to go back through those and jot down who you think they might be, hopefully I'll remember to tell you at the end. So again, just another little extension with Wordle beyond what you've already been doing with it, because we know through a lot of your journals and your tryout lessons, a lot of you have been using Wordle in really cool and creative ways. So just another take on it. All right, so vocab grabber is sort of a next level from that. And Troy Hooks throughout this book has talked a lot about using digital text as mentor text to help inform kids in their own composition, whether it's social media or blogs or video text, etc. So one of the areas that I've always struggled with students, especially middle school students, and actually the high school students at times as well, was when we had them writing nonfiction pieces, doing research or picking a current topic, and not so much writing about the topic, because normally it was something they chose and they enjoyed, but it was getting the language, the content vocabulary, and some of the academic vocabulary that really would elevate their piece from, hey, here's a 10th grader writing this, to wow, here's something a little bit higher level. And so, we went with the writing workshop, we went with the mentor text ideas and started to go, okay, well, we can pull in these different articles and things of that nature from, print and newspapers and journals, and get kids to go through and pick out words and mimic the writing. And, as is most times with kids, that was a struggle a lot, just because it was more text for them to get to and to get through, and more things to have to pull, and as they look to rewrite. So I ended up finding vocab grabber, and I'm going to use Newsella. So kind of going with that same theme of nonfiction, and I'm going to demonstrate how this vocab grabber, which can be used with a digital text to help kind of go through that same process to make it a little bit more efficient, a little bit easier for kids, and then actually go a little bit deeper into the types of words that authors use in different types of texts. So we're going to come here to the articles, and obviously I think we had talked about this in class a while back, how this is a set of nonfiction articles, very current, incredibly engaging, and you can also adjust the articles by reading level. So let's pick science, and we can scroll down here and pick a topic that we think might be interesting. So why don't we pick sharks, because everybody seems to love sharks. So let's say you have a student who is writing, and again, if you look over here on the right, you can adjust the lexile of the text to match your different learners and the different reading levels. And there's also a Spanish language version. So let's say you have a kid that's doing a research piece, or trying to do an argumentative piece or an informational piece on sharks, and you're trying to get the idea across to the students around content vocabulary, and they're struggling, right? So you get them on a newsletter, you let them find an article, let them read it, make sense of it, pick out the main idea, note make it, make their own meaning, and then an easy way to have them automatically, so if you highlight the article and copy it, have them pull really good vocabulary out of here. You would paste it in a vocab grabber, then grab vocabulary. So then similar to Wordle, you get sort of a word cloud type of thing at the bottom. But what's really interesting about this particular tool is it then groups the words into categories by discipline or topic. So in this particular article, there are 21 geography words, 6 people words, 14 social studies words, 1 arts and literature word, 9 math words, 13 science words, and 83 vocabulary words. So again, in helping kids to up the ante in their own writing, let's say you've been doing a lot of work around science-specific words for students. So you can unclick all words and then just show the science words. And then it's a great revision piece, a great conversation piece, a great comparison piece for a student to sit there and look and say, wow, you know, am I using words like apex and ecological if they make sense to my article? And obviously you want to have kids do this with articles that are in the same wheelhouse as what they're writing about. But again, you know, ecological might have been a vocab word in your class, and you're like, hey, we talked about that in class, you know, here's how it can be used. So if we can click on that on the right-hand side, it will give us how it's used in context. It'll give us definition, adjectives, and how it's used in context. So, you know, obviously the students are going to have to take the time to go through this, but when you talk about and work with them in terms of mentoring the writing process and using good models of writing, and then how do you really get at that key vocabulary? You can take it to the next level and try to make the connection with science class. So which words in this article were math words. So here are a series of math words that were used throughout the course of the article. And again, looking at definitions and also words in context. So different ways you can really look to help kids engage with content texts, and then pulling out different types of words. You know, like a student could sit there and say, I didn't realize any socialized words would have ever been used in a scientific text. So let me see what that looks like. And then, you know, getting through that language and then having them, you know, talk about and look and write about, and then obviously mimic later on that same type of style and those same type of words within their own writing is really the key here. So take a minute. You know, it wasn't a full BDA. We didn't do a real reading of a text or anything and get engaged through a before activity or anything, but thinking about just sort of the rough walkthrough of how that might have worked from that description. You know, where were the lenses have been present in that activity, what processes were used, and then how might you be able to adapt this to your situation in your classroom in terms of helping kids to really dive a little bit more into writing and the use of content vocab and investigating language. All right, so we're going to come back to here. So that is the during of where we are, and then the after is obviously getting the journal done. So hopefully as part of the before, you'll have done your group reading talk and comment on other people's, watched and taken care of this video, and then done your wrap up. So I'm going to bring this back to the front here. So this was Google Hangouts, and what this is Google's video chat service, I guess you can call it. You can invite multiple people into a conversation, into a hangout, and you'll see along the bottom, you can't really see it on mine, but you would see their faces and names along the bottom and can have ongoing dialogue and conversations. Obviously you can share screens. There are options where you can drop YouTube videos right in here, have Q&A forums, have a little chat area. There's a lot of different add-ons you can do within this with collaborating with colleagues. You know, if you have colleagues in other buildings across the district that you rarely get to see, this would be a great way to share lesson ideas, connect your classes. I know when I was teaching my last couple years and this was available, this is how I left sub-plans. Just like I'm doing this with you guys now. So really walking the kids through the the whole lesson with the materials, with the visuals and everything, and telling them they can pause and get back to it later, and that sort of thing. But it was a good way to really, when I wasn't there physically, I could be there virtually in a recorded manner. The fun part of this too, especially when playing around with the leaving sub plans and things, there's a bunch of different little effects you can mess around with, that thing from headwear to eyewear to facial hair. So just kind of a fun way. Kids always got a kick out of this. Even the AP kids at the high school would laugh whenever we would leave sub plans and do something like this, especially with the sound effects. So just kind of a fun way to engage students in some of the lessons if you're not going to be around. So that is the end of session 8.